Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is Monday, October 20th, 2014. And if you don't, when we're not online, you could always go check out our information at www.arh.noaa.gov. We also have a weather information line for you available at 1-800-472-0391, and you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter for the latest information. Now on to the hot topic of the day. We have warnings out here along the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. This is out till 10 p.m. tonight for high gusty winds. Winds are going to be sustained between 30 and 40 miles per hour with higher gusts up to 65 miles per hour. They're also seeing some reduced visibilities in this area down to 1 mile or less at times. So we should see those winds taper off tonight after 10 p.m. and so be advised if you're in that area, it's going to be very gusty and low visibilities. Travel will be difficult. They had experienced some light freezing drizzle across some of the central areas west of the Dalton Highway. That freezing rain advisory is out for this evening as well. Now taking a look at the weather that's going to be impacting us over the next few days, we have the northeast coast, high winds, snow and fog and freezing drizzle, and this is going to be lasting through midweek. Then we also have gales across the eastern Bering and Aleutians and also much of the Gulf waters. We do have improving weather conditions across the interior as we're already starting to experience for the most part. But let's take a look at the satellites out west. Focusing here on the jet stream with this moisture plume moving up towards the Gulf of Alaska. Putting that into motion, you can see that streaming to the south, and just over the Bering waters we have low pressure. Right behind the low pressures brings some very cool air mass with some low clouds stretching all across the Bering waters. So you can see that's pulling down from the north as we have a high ridge just building into the western areas of the Bering. So looking at a photo close to home, we have one low pressure system sitting here just to the south of Kodiak Island, and we have another low pressure right behind it that came across the central Aleutians and now is just south of the central and eastern Aleutians. Putting that into motion, you can see the one low heads dug towards the southeast, and this other low is on its way towards the Gulf of Alaska. Across the interior, we have mostly cloudy skies with low pressure, the dominant system across the area, with some breaks in the clouds along the Alaska Peninsula during the afternoon hours, and we have some low clouds actually moving ahead of the system moving up towards the Gulf of Alaska. Looking at the weather map for today, here's the occluded front along the surface low is a 978 millibar low, so this system is going to be moving north, and across the southern interior we have this boundary that moved into south central in the overnight hours, bring snow conditions all across the area, with the Anchorage Bowl seeing between 4 to 8 inches of snowfall there, with lighter snowfall across the northern areas of town. Eagle River seeing up to 1 inch, so that's therefore first large snowfall of the year. Across the northeastern areas we have a tight gradient as high pressure sits to the north and squeezing the gradient between low pressure to the south. So we have gusty winds all across the coastal areas back through the northwest, so they're experiencing some gusty winds and light snow showers all along the back system of this low pressure system. Here to the west we have this large area of high pressure, and that's moving up towards the western Aleutians. Here's Shimia right in the west, and then we have a tight gradient that remains all across the eastern areas of the Bering brings some gusty wind conditions as they have been for the last few days. Not much is going to change across the Bering with this tight gradient staying in place. Mainly snow across the northern half of the Bering, changing over to rain across the Aleutians as this high pressure system is bringing a very warm air mass into the Aleutians once again. Across the northern areas of the state, very gusty winds will continue, mixed precipitation with drizzle, light snow, and then we also have snow across the Brooks Range and lighter shower type activity tonight for the interior. Along the south, expect just some isolated shower activity as this weak boundary remains across the areas in south central. Now this next low pressure system is bringing some warmer air up with it, and it's going to bring just some light shower activity just ahead of this frontal system here. Some light showers and patchy fog might also develop across the southeast, but the winds are blowing strong enough this afternoon and probably will continue overnight as we keep this gradient on the east side of this low pressure system. But just be aware that patchy fog may develop in these areas overnight. And as we head into your forecast for Tuesday, here's this gradient remaining tight across the southeast. So winds will be picking up across the Dixon entrance areas first earlier in the day, and then gusty winds later across the rest of the eastern Gulf and the inner channels. Now a low pressure system will bring some showers on the backside of this low. However, should stay fairly dry across the area Tuesday. There's a chance for mixed precipitation, probably some light snow over at the Yakutat area just before it changes over to any light rain that moves into the coast. Across the central interior, here's those light showers in between two systems. High pressure to the north, keeping that squeezed along the north coast, and across the northwest, just mainly showery conditions changing over to light rain across the southern areas of the Bering. And like I said, this ridge is going to be building into the western Aleutians and working on its way forward as another low pressure system across the eastern areas of Russia is bringing another cold air mass, and that's going to be heading towards the Bering, breaking this ridge down later in the week. Now for Wednesday, expect gusty winds to continue across the Alaska Peninsula and possible wind gusts across the Bristol Bay area. Otherwise, across the central interior, expect some lighter showers, flurries possible, with the gustier winds still off the northeastern Beaufort Seacoast back towards the northwest, with snow and patchy fog staying in the forecast through Wednesday. And like I said, there's also a chance for that freezing precip to linger into Wednesday as well. Now, this low pressure system will be lifting Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, so increased precipitation for the southeast enters the forecast Tuesday night. And then we'll see most of the rain Tuesday night with lingering rain chances through the day on Wednesday as this front slowly moves to the north and just kind of stalls. And then we have lighter showers across towards the eastern part of the Kenai, and then Kodiak will be mainly dry conditions with possible wind gusts out of the north. Looking at your temperatures for today, it was warmest down across the southeast with temperatures reaching into the upper 40s here. 52 was not actually the high, 57 was the highest reported at Annette, and we had 52 at Petersburg. And then across the coastal locations, we saw highs up into the mid-40s, 36 at Anchorage, and along the Kenai. Slow drop down just north of the Alaska Range in the 20s, very cool across the interior. And then along the north coastal areas, saw temperatures in the teens up near Barrow, and then the coldest over at Anaktuvuk Pass during the daytime. They only went up to 10 degrees this afternoon. Across the northwest coast, it was a slow climb into the mid-30s, and then across the southwest, they were mainly in the upper 20s to lower 30s. Alaska Peninsula saw temperatures in the mid-30 range with temperatures in the lower 40s all across the Aleutians, slightly warmer with the high pressure building into Shemya. Looking at your temperatures for tonight, not much change along the Aleutians. Temperatures staying in the low to mid-40s, with the Alaska Peninsula dropping into the mid-30s. Across the southwest, expect temperatures to drop into the teens to lower 20s, and then across the west coast, expect temperatures in the upper 20s with lower 20s just north of the Brooks Range. The coldest across the central interior with temperatures ranging from 10 degrees to 20 degrees on average. Slightly colder Also across south central in the mid-teens. And then along the coast, expect temperatures to drop to near freezing. So any of the snow that fell today and melted on the roads, you want to be careful tomorrow morning as temperatures get very close to freezing in the roadways in this area. Across the southeastern areas, they will stay above freezing with temperatures reaching near 40 degrees for most locations. Now looking at your temperatures for tomorrow, another warm day for the southeast, up into the mid-50s for much of the area, and then warmer temperatures working back in towards the coast with temperatures climbing into the mid-40s. Interior, slightly warmer for tomorrow in the upper 20s to lower 30s along the north coast and northwest. Very steady temps near 20s, similar to today. And then the Seward Peninsula, slow climb up into the mid-30s and a drop again towards the Kuskokwim Delta and Kuskokwim Valley areas in the lower 30s. Alaska Peninsula will be in the lower 40s to upper 30s. Looking at your flying weather tomorrow with a large area of low pressure across much of the state, we're going to see mainly MVFR ceilings across the Gulf of Alaska back into towards the central interior and southwest and eastern Bering, with some improvement at times up to VFR, but mainly MVFR. And then tomorrow across the north and northeastern areas, expect MVFR conditions with some areas of IFR across the state. And along the western Aleutians here, we'll see some fog developing, so they should have decreasing visibilities across the western Aleutians. Now looking at your passes in more depth, IFR. Conditions on the north entrance for Anaktuvik, MVFR, mainly for Anaktuvik Pass, and then Adigan will also be MVFR with IFR to the north. Looking at Merrill Field and Lake Clark, both MVFR, and Rainy Pass will be MVFR. Your Windy Pass will be MVFR, and Isabel will be MVFR, and Mentasta will be MVFR, and Tanita will go from MVFR to possible VFR in the afternoon. Looking at Portage, mainly MVFR conditions. Chilkoot and White Pass will be in that rain area, MVFR conditions for both passes. Looking at your freezing levels, they're draped here across the Bering Strait and down towards the Alaska Peninsula and hugging the Gulf coastal areas. 2,000 to 4,000 across the Gulf of Alaska, and mainly a 2,000-foot level to the western Aleutians with warming trends coming from the west. Looking at your icing for tomorrow, mainly light areas of icing all across the areas of the state where low pressure is along the coast and the southeast as well. Some icing also along this boundary between the low and the high pressure. So that's below 5,000 feet, above 1,500 feet across the eastern Bering locations, and below 7 feet across the southeast. Now taking a look at your jet stream tomorrow, mainly a westerly flow with 100 to 110 knot jet just staying south of the mainland. Looking at your 9,000 foot winds around this low pressure system in the Gulf of Alaska, strongest on the east side, 45 knots, wrapping around to 35 knots along the northern coast. Kind of weak inland between around 15 knots out of the east, and then also an easterly flow above the Brooks Range around 20 knots. The rest of the Bering will see a 30 to 50 knot flow, with the strongest across the central and south Bering out of the west. And looking at your 3,000 foot winds, very similar pattern. Lighter winds out here with the ridging to the west, and mainly a northerly flow, 35 knots across the Bering, and 40 to 50 knots across the Gulf of Alaska, change of direction around the low pressure there. And then we have an easterly flow with a very high speeds across the northern and northwestern areas of the state between 25 and 30 knots. Looking at your turbulence tomorrow, will mainly be confined just north of the Brooks Range and across the eastern part of the Bering, below 6,000 to 8,000 feet in the Bering, below 5,000 to the north. And then an area just to the north, possible occasional widespread moderate conditions here, and below 6,000 feet. In just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our guest this evening is a leader in unmanned aircraft and unmanned vehicles, actually, and president of the largest industry organization focused on unmanned systems. Mike Toscano has had a distinguished career in federal government and now leads a truly world-class organization with almost 8,000 individual members. Mike came to Anchorage to participate in the 7th annual Alaska UAS Interest Group Conference. The conference, in fact, this year had almost 200 members and included internationally important representatives like Mike. Mike, welcome to Hangar Flight.
Harry, hey, thank you for having me on the show.
It's a real honor to have you here, sir. Let's start by talking about your passion for the future of UAS.
Well, first of all, Harry, this is a revolutionary technology on an evolutionary path. And when I say that, it basically is a technology that can truly change the world. In doing those things, and I think we've talked about the 4 Ds, the dirty, dangerous, difficult, and dull jobs that human beings do every day. And this is one of those technologies that can be more effective, more efficient, and in many cases, life-saving.
Can you describe your organization, AUVSI?
Sure. We're a nonprofit organization for the advancement of unmanned systems, those things that fly, drive, and navigate in the air, on our highways or roadways, and in the oceans. And this unmanned system technology is one of those things that, as I mentioned earlier, will change the world because of the 2 things they do very well. They're very good at providing situational awareness, and they're very good as a delivery system. So when you stop and think what men and women do today in their jobs, if having better information to make smarter decisions is important to you, or the ability to get something from point A to point B in sometimes very hazardous or very hostile environments, this is a good capability.
I've always admired your organization. In fact, I've been a member just about as long as I've been involved with UAS, I think 8 years, 7 or 8 years. And I really want to thank you for the contributions you make, because I think you, from my viewpoint, you spread the word about unmanned vehicles, and you advocate for them, and I think it is the future, just like you say. So thanks for what you do.
Well, Harry, it's, you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of unknown aspects of unmanned systems. And unfortunately, sometimes what we've seen in Hollywood or what we imagine is not the truth. And one of the things, as a nonprofit organization, we've been at this for 42 years. Wow. So we were country when country wasn't cool. But people are now starting to realize the potential of this technology and the potential of how it can, in fact, do those things that we look at today, and sometimes, especially the very hostile environments that we have to deal with, and say this is a better way of doing business. This is a better mousetrap in many cases.
You know, Mike, when I first started going to your international conferences about 8 years ago, it was almost exclusively military. Right. And that has really changed. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. This is definitely one of those technologies, just like many other technologies, where the research and development came from the military side of the house. It was used by the military, and now it's transitioning to the public safety and to the commercial applications. There's an example that one of my colleagues uses, is the jet engine. So from an aviation standpoint, the jet engine came out of the military for the most part. And once it got commercialized, it became more reliable and much more affordable, and then came back to the military, to the point now where the military only is less than 5% of the total market of jet engines, and they buy more jet engines now than they ever have in their existence.
So do you think that's an indicator of what may happen in UAS future?
For sure, for sure. We estimate that, again, the number of unmanned systems that the military has utilized over the last 40, 50 years, we've spent billions of dollars in the research, and the capabilities are very well defined. That will be dwarfed within 10 years of once we're flying in the national airspace by what we'll see on the commercial market. The commercial markets are just growing by leaps and bounds. And when people ask me, well, what would you use this for? I tell them I can't tell you all of them because I just don't know. Who could have predicted that writing apps would be a 6-figure salary 7 years ago? We didn't even know what an app was.
Right.
Well, that's what's going to happen with this technology. Once you put it into the hands of men and women that know how to do their job better than anyone else, they're going to come up with ways how to utilize this technology that we could have said, geez, I could have thought of that, just like, I could have invented the paperclip. I didn't, but, I'm smart enough to do that. So this is one of those technologies that I think truly is going to cause people to take a look at how they do their job and figure out a better way to do it more effectively, more efficiently. And as I said earlier, it could be life-saving in many aspects.
Mike, thanks for being on the program, and I really appreciate your enthusiasm. I'd like to get you on next time, and maybe we'll talk about some of the hot issues with
Anytime for you, Harry. You just let me know when you need me there.
All right, thanks, Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program, and we'll have a couple more of our editions coming up talking about unmanned aircraft and drones. But I want to remind you that on November 15th, here in Anchorage at the Lusac Library, we're going to have our Fall Safety Seminar. It'll run from 8 to 4. It's free, and I think you'll really enjoy it. The topic this year is going to be VMC into IMC, which is a killer, and it is a real problem in Alaska. So put that on your calendars, November 15th, and until next time, fly safe.
Welcome back to the show, and let's take a look at your ice forecast. Well, there hasn't been much change along the coastal locations for ice growth, but the one thing to note is that we're going to have some strong northerly flow, so we'll have some ice movement towards the south. And then let's go back over to the southeast and take a look at your winds for Tuesday. It's going to be kind of a strong flow for tomorrow even. Winds will be changing at least out of the north for the inner channels between 20 and 30 miles per hour. And then as you head towards the Clarence Strait, gale force out of the southeast at 35 knots. And then we'll see across the eastern Gulf waters, mainly gales here between 35 and 40 knots, slightly weaker winds towards Yakutat at 25 knots. And then we'll see seas between 4 to 6 feet across the inner channels. And then you get towards the Clarence Strait here, and then they'll change to about 12 feet. And this is going to increase, you know, through the daytime hours. So they might not start as high, but they will get there. Now across the outer waters, we'll see waves mainly between 12 and 15 feet, with slightly higher to the south at 19 feet. And then as we head into your Wednesday forecast, even stronger winds on tap for the outer waters, with gales across the Yakutat and south around 40 knots out of the east, remaining east to the south, but slightly lighter small craft around 20 to 25 knots here. And then across the inner channels, we'll have small craft across the entire area with 25 knots to the north. We'll see northerly flow changing out of the southeast as you head towards the Dixon entrance. Wave heights will be around 5 feet, and then the outer waters still higher between 12 and 18 feet, with the highest around 19 feet to the south. And then looking at your western Gulf areas, Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet, we'll see primarily a north to northeasterly flow across the area, with the strongest winds across the inlet areas, a little bit across the northern Gulf, but everything's under small craft for your Tuesday forecast. And we'll see Prince William Sound at 3 foot for seas, and across the Cook Inlet between 3 and 5 feet down towards the Barren Islands. Across the outer waters, we'll see between 5 and 8 feet, and across the Shelikof Strait around 3 feet. The big change will come on Wednesday when the winds increase. We'll see small crafts picking up across the western Gulf waters, and that's going to be primarily between 25 to 30 knots out of the north and easterly directions here, and then across the Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, a northerly direction, and then a little bit stronger winds across the Barren Islands as well, around 25 knots. Now looking at your seas, around 3 feet for Prince William Sound and 3 to 5 feet again across Cook Inlet. And then we'll see seas between 5 and 7 feet for the Barren Islands, just closer to the Shelikof Strait, around 5 feet. And then across the northern and western Gulf waters, higher seas here between 13 and 14 feet. Looking at the Alaska Peninsula, primarily a northerly flow, gales across the northern Alaska Peninsula out of the northwest direction. And then seas will be 3 feet for Bristol Bay, 13 feet across the Bering waters, and 10 feet just south of the Sandpoint area, a little bit weaker towards Kodiak at 4 feet. And then Wednesday, a little bit stronger winds with gales picking up to the south of the Alaska Peninsula, and then small craft elsewhere out of the north and westerly direction. 7 to 5 foot seas across the Bering, and then 9 to 13 across the North Pacific. Across your Aleutian chain for Tuesday, we're going to see primarily a northwesterly flow changing to the west and southwest as you head towards Shimia, and then we'll mostly small craft across the eastern half of the chain with some gales as well from the east on over towards the western edge of the Alaska Peninsula and out towards the west 20-knot winds. Seas across the west will be between 7 and 9 feet, and then across the rest of the Aleutians between 10 and 14 foot. And then we'll see on Wednesday very much the steady state, except a stronger wind out here at Shimia at 35 knots out of the southwest, and then becoming northwest across the remainder of the Aleutians. And we'll see seas on this day between 7 and 12 feet mainly, except a little bit higher seas across the Bering side around 15 feet north of the eastern Aleutians. Your west coastal waters will see between 20 to 35 knots, and then we'll see the strongest winds across the Pribilof Islands, and we'll have gales there, and seas will be between 7 and 9 feet just off the coast, a little bit higher, 12 to 13 towards the central areas. Wednesday's forecast will bring a north to northwesterly flow, small crafts across the area, and then seas would be between 6 and 9 feet, slightly higher near the Pribilofs around 12 feet. Across the northwest and north coast, we'll see stronger winds for your Tuesday forecast between 30 and 40 knots with small crafts all across the area and freezing spray as well. So heavy freezing spray warnings out along the coastals, 14 to 10 foot seas across the northwest and between 10 and 12 across the northern areas. And we're not going to see much change with higher gusts continuing on your Wednesday forecast, gales for much of the area and heavy freezing spray all across the coastal areas back towards Kotzebue Sound. A little bit lighter wind speed on your Wednesday, but mainly small craft and gale force winds. Now we'll also see seas between 7 and 10 feet across the entire area. And looking at a recap of your overnight forecast tonight, low pressure slowly making its way up to the southeast, going to bring some rain, maybe some light snow showers across the south central and interior with freezing rain and light freezing drizzle across the northern coast. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow
These
night.
forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.